You've been called in for an interview. You've gone through the several interview stages that the company requires. You've now been called in for the final interview. What tips can you consider to ensure that you pass this final interview because you're in the final stage? Mary is here joining me today to explain, to give you tips on how you can pass your final interview. My name is Cynthia Wakio, the Communication and Events Manager at Corporate Staffing Services, and welcome to our session today. Thank you for joining me, Mary.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
What does the final interview look like? What does it mean?
First of all, final interview for me is a very good news because I'm like the employer or the organization is actually interested in me and what I'm able to bring on board. So I look at it from the point of it is a very good news for me. And it is at that point for the employer, it is just a confirmation that they have the right candidate that they want to bring on board. But on the other hand, you find candidates take the final interview as more of formality, or sometimes they don't take it with all the seriousness it deserves as the other initial interviews that they have had. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. The formality, you know, it's a formality, so you just show up without even preparation. So you've gotten all the way to that stage because of something in your CV. There's something you did in the interview that was able to impress the employer. So what are the tips you can consider doing to ensure that you pass this interview?
Number one, as a candidate, you need to know that this interview should be given the same kind of seriousness, just like any other interview. In fact, what I normally tell candidates is to treat the final interview as though it is the very first one. So the same way you had prepared for it initially, it's the same way you need to prepare also for the final stage. Why do I say that? Because in most cases, you will find in the final interview, there is always a new person or a new face that you're going to meet there. The employer has taken you through the first stage, maybe the second stage, and this is the third and the final one. They will always have a third party in the panel just to help them affirm or rather ascertain that indeed they have the right candidate. So for you as a candidate, if you did not take your time to prepare very well for the final interview, then the third party whom you are meeting for the very first time may not have the right impression of you. And remember, the employer is relying fully on them to help them make the final decision. So tip number one, ensure that you give it the same energy in terms of preparation, get to prepare in terms of the job description, be able to still demonstrate your knowledge of the role, talk about your track record, how your journey, your experience has really prepared you for the role at hand, what is really motivating you to work for that organization, understand the employer still in terms of what is currently trending about them, what is currently in the news about their services, what's your passion towards that industry or sector. So preparation is still very key. Another tip for the final interview is always prepare a set of questions for the panel. And in this case, maybe the kind of questions you would prepare for a final interview are expected to be slightly different from the questions you had prepared for the other stages of the interview. Remember, at the final stage, the employer is seeing you already as one of their employees. And so even at this stage, the kind of questions you will be asking, because every interview session, whether it is the first one, second, or last one, the last question will always be, do you have any questions for us? So ensure even at this final stage, be strategic with the kind of questions that you have for the panel. Ensure the questions are really selling you out in terms of being seen as someone who is passionate and ready to work and to help the organization drive or rather achieve their objectives or their goals as per the role at hand. Very important, yeah.
I think here is also where you get to discuss about salary. And most people don't do their research on how the industry is paying and how they can be able to negotiate better offers for themselves. So I think this is something also to consider, to do your research around that.
Well, yes, the question of salary, first of all, it should never come from the candidate's perspective until the employer or the interviewer brings it up as a topic of discussion. Then for you, it calls for you to always be prepared, because you don't know at what stage of the interview will the issue of salary be brought on the table.
Yeah.
So when it comes to salary negotiations, of course, I normally say or rather advise candidates to always have a range in mind. First of all, do your market research, get to find out how much are people in this position, in this particular industry, most likely to be paid. That is, if you don't know anybody from within that organization who can give you that information. So always have a range, of course, and be prepared even when you're quoting that range. Sell yourself in terms of how are the skills or the values you're bringing on board well equated to the amount that you are quoting, such that the amount that you're quoting is able to compensate you in terms of the skills and the values that you're bringing on board. At the final stage as a candidate, always be ready also for that salary negotiation bit of it, because chances are high it might be raised at that stage. Yeah.
So speaking of, as we wrap up, what final advice would you give to our candidates now at the final interview stage?
The advice I would give to a candidate who has received that email inviting them for the final interview is that always remember the final interview is more competitive. Maybe the employer has 2 good candidates and now they are torn in between. Now, who do we go settle for? That's why I said earlier there will always be a third party in the panel. And even over and above there being a third party in the panel, what you do after that final interview session equally matters and speaks volume for you as a candidate. It is during the final interview that you will find it's more relaxed after the session, and the employer may decide to walk you around the organization. They are basically testing you in terms of how are you able to interact with people. So it still calls for you to have it at the back of your mind that whatever it is that is going on, I'm still in the interview mood. And so even the way you interact with people, the way you greet the receptionist or the admin, the person who is walking you around, the kind of questions that you are asking them as you converse with them also speaks volumes. And then lastly, at the end of the day, very important as a candidate, always do a follow-up email. The follow-up email helps to set candidates apart. Maybe for this final interview, you were 2 candidates, and even during that final interview, both of you still showed you have what the employer is looking for. So the employer is still torn in between on whom to settle for. Now they are waiting for who is that candidate who is even going to remember to send a thank you note after the session. Very important as a candidate, final stage of your interview, always send a follow-up email, just appreciating the employer for having you, for interviewing you earlier on in the day, and just let them know that in case there is any other thing that they may need you to provide to make the recruitment or the hiring process more smooth and faster, then they can feel free to reach out. And importantly, never forget to drop your contact number. Very important. Yeah.
The stakes are high, I think.
Definitely, stakes are high.
So you have to really prepare very well.
Yes.
Thank you for those tips, Mary.
You're welcome.
Thanks for watching this video. If you have a comment that you'd like to leave about the topic we have discussed, please leave it in the comments below. We have interview coaching services that can help you prepare for any stage of your interview so that you are able to stand out. Click on the link below and our interview coach, Mary, will reach out for the next steps. See you in the next video.